Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly Gardner. I'm a senior at Howard University and the co-organizer of the Jersey City Americans with Disabilities Act Virtual Festival, and I have a YouTube channel. It's nice to be here today.
Fantastic. Great to have you. Adam, hit us. Who are you?
There we go. Still getting used to Microsoft software here. My name is Adam Hill. I work with Destinations Cape Breton. One moment. You gotta go left. Sorry about that, guys. My name is Adam Hill. I work with Destination Cape Breton, and I help manage our content as well as work with influencers. And I also photograph on the side and run my own successful social media channels as well.
Awesome. Just a quick public service announcement. Kids are totally welcome on camera and on screen. I mean that literally and seriously. Everybody here is going to have, or anyone who's got kids in the house, the kids are going to make an appearance at some point. So just roll with it, and they're totally cool. If they want to come and play with the microphone, let them come in, let them take part. That's a way actually of adding a little bit of pizzazz to your own presentation sometimes. But remember that viral video from the guy in Hong Kong, maybe it was? I don't remember. It was somewhere out east. But yeah, please don't feel embarrassed if that happens. In fact, bring them in the room and just put your mind at ease so you don't worry about sneak attacks. All right, let's keep running around. AJ, who are you?
I am AJ Fraser, and I'm a teaching and learning specialist with the Center for Teaching and Learning at CBU.
Fantastic. And Debbie?
Hi, Debbie Hendrickson. I work with the Office of Research and Graduate Studies and the Center for Teaching and Learning, and my title is Research and Teaching Communication Specialist. So I share lots of the research stories that are happening at CBU.
I don't know if I knew your formal title. That's a great title, Debbie.
I don't know. It suggests a lot of panache. I don't know what my background is looking like here. I relocated to the lower level of my house, so I need a little bit of panache in my background, I think.
Fair enough. So I put on, hopefully when you guys came in, there was a slide that you should have been able to see. Could you see that slide? Maybe you could not. You were supposed to be able to see a slide. Anyways, I put just a PowerPoint slide that was supposed to allow you to ponder as you come into class. Teams sometimes plays nice and sometimes it doesn't. But basically, I just threw up I think the Merriam-Webster Dictionary of Panache. And I'm going to clarify that it is not definition number 2, an ornamental plume of feathers, tassels, or the like, especially when worn on a helmet or cap. But if you do want to wear one of those, Google, by the way, Panache helmet and see what one of these looks like. If you want to wear one of those in any presentation, it's going to add value to your presentation. I guarantee it. But the definition of panache that you see there is a grand or flamboyant manner, verve, style, flair. So I do want to expand a little bit. Grand or flamboyant can be a little bit intimidating, but really what we're after is this idea of presenting with style, right? And the manifestation of style, I think, as you're going to see in today's session, is going to be very different depending on the media, and it's going to be very different depending on the presenter as well. There's not just one way of dealing with or presenting with style. We're going to kind of explore that. But just to get going here, I want to use a feature. We're going to do this a few times during the presentation. This is a feature I learned recently that I really like. It's called an answer waterfall. Have any of you guys ever used an answer waterfall? So this is a great way actually of getting some interactivity, because no one ever likes to go and just be the only person responding to things. So this is what I want you guys to do, is just to open up the chat window there, and I want you to type in an answer, but don't hit enter, okay? Just type it in, do not hit enter. And then I'm going to give you guys a 1, 2, 3, and everyone's going to hit enter at the same time, okay? So what I want you to do is just type in there, what does presenting with style mean to you in a SciComm perspective? What does that mean? Just one sentence kind of thing, or a couple of words. What does it mean to present with style from a science communication perspective? Okay, everyone's good? All right, we're going to do a 1, 2, 3, and everyone hit return at the same time. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and hit return. So you should have a whole bunch of things. So by the way, why this works is it helps remove some of the stress, because you're especially in a large class setting, suddenly you're not the only person taking a risk, right? You're lost kind of within the context, but also it gives you a chance to zip through. So take a moment and just kind of run through some of these answers here. See what we've got. Enthusiasm, understanding your subject, seamlessly communicating, well-designed, easy to understand, visuals are good. Establishing credibility, engagement, focusing on the audience's needs, creating an engaging message, retention of audience, keeping the audience on the edge of their seat or engaged. We've got a lot of circling on this idea of engagement or keeping attention. Friendly, there's a good one there. Okay. Let's do this one more time. Now I want you guys, if you can't think of anyone, that's fine. Take a moment and write in an example, right? An example of someone that you can think of. It can be a celebrity or someone local who presents with panache, who presents with style, flair, does the job well. Sarah, you're getting ahead of the game here, but I also agree. All right, everyone got someone in? All right, hit return. Steve Sutherland. Hey, it's me. I'm making a couple of appearances. David Attenborough. We'll come back to that in a second. I want you to think about David Attenborough and think about whether or not David Attenborough is the kind of person you might think of when you think of punchy and panache, right? And we'll come back to that because I think that's a good spot actually to go up. Raven, the science maven. Check out Raven. If you guys have not seen, that is the definition of panache. Jim St. Clair, RIP. Great special on CBC if you guys didn't hear that, and a big loss to the community. There's me in there a couple of times. This is very flattering. Jinx Hannah, I don't know Jinx Hannah. I'm not dissing David Attenborough, but I do actually want to. So a lot of good suggestions in there, but this is where I want to start now, throwing it back to our panelists here. And I want you guys just to kind of riff off of that. We've got some examples there, and the examples are disparate, right? They represent, I think, a lot of different versions of what it might mean to present with style or panache. So, contrast, let's say, David Attenborough versus Raven, the science maven. If you guys have not seen Raven, check her out. But very different styles, and I think I would agree both present with style. So does someone want to start us just off on that idea of what really it means, you think, to present with style? What does that mean? What is the the central idea, or are there a lot of different ways you can do it and it really doesn't make sense to talk about it as a thing that you can do? AJ, it looks like you want to jump in here.
Yeah, I think one of the things, if I look at that list, and at least the presenters that I'm familiar with on the list, a common thread amongst all of them is their ability to know and understand their audience, which generally is like a layman's audience, a general audience, and be able to relate their material to that audience, right? So if it's Jim St. Clair, who I put in myself, Jim St. Clair was an older gentleman who's been on CBC. And he was talking about things that happened 200 years ago. How boring. But Jim was always able to make the content seem present and relatable and put you into the moment, or to, get you into the character. And I think that was, it's something that, I've noticed you do with your Twitter account. It's something, Bill Nye, if we're talking about Carl Sagan, David Attenborough even, right? He can make, Blue Planet 2, have plenty of pathos and allow you to empathize with the creatures. So I think that's really important. You're on mute there, Jason.
I am. Sorry, I was asking Kimberly if you've got something you'd like to add on to AJ's comments there.
Yes, I do. to me, panache is like more than one way of doing it. It's also when people play to their strengths. Like, what are your innate abilities? Do you have an amazing voice like Neil deGrasse Tyson? He could talk about water forever, and I would listen. Or like, for example, Raven, she just likes rapping and she's good at it, so she combines with science communication. And so if you're really good at telling jokes, if you're really good at referencing stories, if you like memes, if you like GIFs, and you combine that, I think that's staying true to your character and also giving something to your audience.
Yeah, fair enough. Adam?
I would actually have to reiterate what Kimberly was saying, being true to yourself and your strengths and to your personality. If you are a fairly silly person, I like to try to think of myself as not too serious. I always try to make sure that my message always has a little bit of humor in it, something that's not going to alienate anyone from me, myself, or my message. Make sure that I am approachable and make sure that that message gets through in what I'm saying. So you have people like Bill Nye, who is very animated, and that comes through in everything that he does, and it's one of his great strengths. So, you know, why take that away from you, from your message, when it's when it plays so well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to point to people just to the chat window as well. Chantal has just thrown out a list of some excellent female science communicators. Somebody made a comment in the thread earlier that a lot of the examples were male, and that was true and both problematic. And also, I think speaks to maybe a limited definition that we've traditionally had about what it means to, you know, be an effective science communicator. That you've got to be this particular kind of, you know, enthusiastic. I don't know, flamboyant, whatever personality. For me, when I think of science communication, and I'll put some links up as well, the most effective communicator I think I know of is Dr. Catherine Hayhoe down in Texas, and she is just fantastic, but also isn't silly, right? Doesn't play to the, you know, the Bill Nye stereotypes, but can capture any audience, including an audience of Texas evangelicals, which is the one of her main audience she speaks to. Her husband's a pastor. She's an evangelical Christian herself, but also a amazing champion of climate science and a climate scientist herself. And she knows how to speak to that audience in a massively effective way. I've seen her, you know, speak to audiences of hundreds, using a lot of the things actually that people threw out in suggestions. We'll get back to in a second, active engagement of that. I want to move on to the flip side of good, and let's go to bad for a second. I'm gonna start with Debbie on this one, so you can listen and prepare the answer, Debbie. But what is it that scientists do that's terrible, that you wish you could just grab them and slap them and say, stop doing that? Like, what is, if you could make scientists remove one aspect of how they present things that would improve them overall, what would you do, right? What would you do? How would you make them stop being such a scientist in the name of the classic book?
I'm going first. I'm going to say too much data presentation. So I think visual is very important. So if you have visual aids in terms of pictures or products that you can distribute that relate to your science, instead of using the visuals and graphs and data, that's one thing. Also, if you're doing a slide presentation, turning around and looking at the slides during your presentation, you're not engaging effectively with your audience. So those are two key points that I would suggest. Keep your visual aids relevant to your audience, and also face your audience so that you're making eye contact during your presentation. I know it can be a challenge to communicate technical information, but it's not an insurmountable challenge. You have to give your audience some credit. However, you have to kind of bring it to their level. So it's all about recognizing your audience. So consider some of the facets, whether it's demographics or if it's just the background and your intended purpose of your communication. So why are you doing this presentation? What is your communications objective? So that's a whole lot condensed into a little soundbite.
Fantastic. AJ, you had a great response to this in terms of format. If you remember, do you want to share that?
Yeah, I've gone to lots of science presentations and then just walked away kind of discouraged with the subject because people oftentimes will take their paper, their research paper, and directly translate that into a visual presentation. And so they're going abstract, intro, method, results, discussion. And it's just not an effective way to do a presentation. Presentations are storytelling, right? You're trying to connect your subject together, build a bit of an arc, and ultimately get your audience to the same end goal. And if you do kind of follow that paper format, you're going to lose everybody at some point, I think. So I think that would be something to watch out for. If you are doing a presentation, whether it's for colleagues at the university, if it's for your own students, if you're going to a conference, really think about the format. Your paper is there to back you up. Your presentation is there to get people excited and convinced that what you are doing for your work is interesting and important and all that sort of stuff.
I think this is a really good point, and it's one of these things where we have to remember we've been trained to present in a certain way for a certain audience, and when we move outside of that disciplinary context, we sometimes have to untrain ourselves from a pattern of doing things. We wrote a paper for, I think it was the PNAS, one of these, I forget the journal, but the format was actually different in that the methods went at the very end. And that actually threw me off, but it makes so much sense because even reading a paper, getting through that method section is brutal often until you get to the discussion, which is really where you want to get, right? That's the what did we actually find? What's the significance, et cetera? It's at the very end of the paper. And if you follow that format, yeah, that's really problematic. No one's going to be with you by the end of that. Kimberly, do you want to follow up on this?
Yes, I actually was typing a response to AJ because I won at an oral presentation at a conference in California, and it made me realize that if I were to not follow the rubric, which was literally the paper outline method, I would have lost, right? And so it's also like a give and take because I want these audiences and like the judges to move away from that type of formatting, but I'm also wondering like how do I let them know that information? But to answer your question, I feel as though scientists tend to state the problem they're solving as opposed to relating the importance of solving the problem to the audience, right? And so my example was diabetic neuropathy. That was my research 3 years ago. It's important, yes, but some audience members will listen more effectively if the presenter states that the diabetic neuropathy can lead to excessive pain from stroking a soft pillow, which is allodynia. Now I have your attention. Do you want pain? Like when you stroke a soft pillow? The answer is no. So most people are more likely to start listening to me now, as opposed to saying diabetic neuropathy is bad. Please pay attention to my research. So just making it relatable is important.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Okay, let's flip around to the other side. Not what you shouldn't do, and we've already kind of covered this in prescription and kind of solution to some of these problems has already been given. But if there was one thing that scientists really you think they should do, what's your top bit of advice? And Adam, I'm going to get you to start this one. If you could give, and I mean, if you haven't spent a lot of time with a lot of scientists, that's fine, because a lot of these things translate, right? Like, what is really your top bit of advice you would give to anybody for communication? If there's one thing you should do, what's that one thing you should do?
Speak to your audience using terms and vernacular they understand.
Yeah,
and simple. Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Debbie, you want to hit us with something?
That's an incredibly important point. And if you can use visual aids to communicate, so I think that's really going to lend itself to communicating your science. I remember years ago, I was doing environmental presentations talking about recycling of tires. So back in the 90s, all of these new legislative requirements were being imposed on Nova Scotians for the benefit of the environment. So how do you get the buy-in? So one of the things that I used in my presentation was a small piece of rubber mat that was made from tires. And I passed that around and people could touch it and hold it and they could understand that when you're recycling your tires, this is the type of thing that it's being used for, surfaces for playgrounds and so on. And it made it real for people, made it memorable, provided them with some water cooler conversation so that you're amplifying kind of your messaging by using that one piece of visual aid.
Absolutely. We'll do AJ and Kimberly, but I want to just follow up on that point really quickly, Debbie. And I did an interview with Steve Sutherland some years ago, and I brought in some rocks. It's a radio interview, right? And I brought in some rocks more to show him. And at the end, just before he finished the radio interview, he called me on my show and tell and said, like, you've got some specimens there. What have you got? And just had me describe what I was holding. And the show and tell became, tell and show, I guess, right? Where you're telling something and someone has the image in their head. But I thought that was fantastic. I had really just brought them in for him to hold, right? But then he immediately saw that opportunity to do exactly what you were saying. But even in an audio format, those visual aids became, visuals in somebody's head, which I thought was really neat.
I did a backyard composting presentation, I guess. It was an interview and it was for radio. So how do you demonstrate backyard composting for radio? So that was my challenge. But the reporter said, gee, it's no big deal. We have sound effects. So you're going to crunch the leaves as we're going through this. So those sounds were used to convey the information about how to backyard compost.
That is a really cool example. And I'm going to, yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Debbie.
Theater of the mind is how he described it. Mm-hmm.
Both of those points they're really clever, and they actually sort of speak to my point. So, we talked about understanding your audience, and that's, I think, the primary objective, but then also the medium is really important, right? So if you are doing, we've talked about, doing slide deck presentations, and we talked about radio, but, if you're presenting your topic or your research on Twitter or YouTube, or if you are doing it in front of a live classroom, or if you're doing it on like Teams or Zoom or something, there are different ways and more effective ways to engage, right? So like lean into the medium. If you're doing a presentation on Teams, for instance, like what Jason did, he did the waterfall thing. He explained an activity and then got us all to go through the activity together. And the effectiveness of that is that, there's a group cohesiveness. We've got everybody talking now. We built community. We're all kind of on the same page. A little bit of stress is released. If it's YouTube or if it's Twitter, you're gonna want to follow. If somebody comments on your tweet or retweets you, you're gonna want to re-engage with that person. So there are different ways to sort of follow up and engage and sort of take the medium and treat the medium the best way possible.
Absolutely. Kimberly?
I agree with everyone's points.
Fair enough. I just wanted to, Betsy made a comment earlier in the chat here. I'm following a little bit, but not super closely. But everyone should. There's lots of really neat stuff in here. And by the way, to any of the presenters or to anyone listening, because you guys are participants as well. This is communication. It's bi-directional. Really feel free to pose questions in there, but also to answer questions. You can have a dialogue going in there. We got kind of simultaneous text and audio and visual, obviously, dialogue going. But Betsy made a comment about sound effects, and it reminded me, there's a podcast I listened to where they have a segment called, I think, Who's That Noisy? Something like that, where they play a random sound. And then everyone has to try to guess what that sound is. And the next episode, they play that thing. But as part of it, it's a lead into always an explanation of what that sound was. Because it's a science podcast. So it's usually something really interesting, like, the sound of a pulsar, how it's represented on, how it's represented in data or something like that, right? And then they have a chance to actually explain it. But it's such a great hook, right? And it also sends people out exploring the world in the week in between, right? Just a neat little way of adding a bit of again, panache, but yeah, using audio, in that case, an audio format. But okay, so at this point, I want to kind of jump into a question that maybe some people have in their mind, which is, what if you're just boring, right? What if what if you don't have the natural pizzazz? And some people just don't. We're a spectrum from the overwhelming extroverts that you try to escape at parties, right, to the people who dread going to the parties. I mean, some of us just naturally jump in front of an audience and it's where we live to be, and other people, it's going to take a little bit of effort to get you there. So assuming that you're on that latter end of the spectrum, and you might think, I'm just someone who is not going to be a presenter. Right? I think the answer that all the panelists are going to have is that that's not true. There's a medium and a format. But what would you say to that person who says, look, I'm just I don't have a lot of panache. That's just not who I am. Well, what would you say to that person? And let's start Adam this time around.
Do you mind if you come back to me on that one?
Yeah, no worries at all. Let's I'll just open it up. Whoever wants to volunteer something, go for it.
I'll volunteer something. I've worked with subject experts, and they were, I guess, the resident experts, so they were expected to give the presentation. So are they necessarily the best presenter? No, but they're the most credible resource. So you position the most credible as your spokesperson, if you will. So talking a little bit about the public forum or the media forum. If you can have something in terms of a handout or a visual aid that you can distribute to people in attendance that summarizes in a more engaging way the material that was presented by the subject expert. So that's one thing that I can share.
Yeah, Kimberly?
I want to say that there's power in preparation if you're not like the outgoing person. So definitely having some notes jot down of like the key points you want to say, practicing in front of a teddy bear or a mirror, and definitely just playing to your strengths, whatever those might be. But I definitely would stray on the introverted side as well. I can't present anything without having a written format. I have a pencil and a book in front of me. Like I write everything down. And so it just really depends on the person, but I prefer preparation.
Fair enough. Adam, you good to come back, or you can pass on this if you want to?
I'm going to pass on this one.
No worries at all. AJ, you got something for us?
Yeah, I think it's like if you're not cool and you want to be cool, hang out with cool kids. If you want to get smarter, you hang out with people who are smarter than you. If you want to be a better presenter, if you want to be more engaging, you should just spend more time with people who are maybe in your field, and you look to them as a great resource to somebody who kind of presents with panache. So if that's on social media profiles, like jump on Twitter and find a science communicator that you really enjoy and engage with their material. And then, as you start to kind of tweet out your own stuff, they're probably going to engage with yours. Like maybe you don't have a big following yourself to start. You build these things over time. Or, if there's a related article, a blog post or something, a video that somebody put out, retweet that, put that out there yourself with maybe a little bit of commentary. Over time, I think that proximity to, great communication skills, it does start to rub off, right? If you just kind of copy what other people do, maybe not the content, but how they do it, eventually that does start to sink in. So I would say kind of the same thing as Kimberly there. You practice it out, right? Communication itself is a skill, and it's something that you can work on. It's not this inherent, I have it, you don't have it. So it's something you can work on.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up actually with something that Kimberly said in email exchange earlier on that I thought was a really good point, which is essentially don't force it. Like don't if you're not someone who's a joke teller, don't try to put a bad punchline in your joke in your presentation. Don't play to your strengths. And part of what we're going to do actually in the next round, we're going to play around with a reminder that you've got a lot of different ways of presenting, right? And what works for you. The nice thing now is we don't just have a classroom or the public podium. We've got a million different things. If you're a photographer, maybe your way of presenting with panache is just to show your amazing photographic skills using Instagram. Maybe that's your home, right? On the other hand, TikTok is perfect for the person who's got that improv sensibility. If you have not checked out, and I really urge you guys do, check out Raven the Science Maven. If you have not checked out, if you want to see an amazing example of that kind of, I'm going to use the Bill Nye as an example, but it really is a different thing, right? But it's that really like, kind of hilarious, like jumping between. She literally wears costumes and does multiple characters back and forth as dialogues between different characters, all in a few seconds of time often, but communicating, PhD level stuff. She just defended her PhD, like high level stuff, but in a style that I can't do, and I'm a pretty outgoing guy. I'm not going to try doing that. On the other hand, Catherine Hayhoe, which is again one of these fantastic presenters, she has this amazing explainer series on YouTube, and her Twitter feeds, her Twitter threads are amazing, but they are so different. So don't force it, right? Find the medium that works for you and find the style that works for you, and then just do that. But again, as AJ noted, find exemplars and copy the exemplars, but pick an exemplar who you can legitimately aspire to be, right? Don't pick someone who is going to require you to become an entirely different person, right? That's only going to end in failure, I think. So let's just take a moment here. The next round I actually want to do, the next thing I want to do is run through a speed dating kind of round of one-off suggestions on a series of different mediums. So we'll expand that. What do you do for Instagram? What do you do for YouTube? But before that, I want to give everyone who is in the participants, category here a chance to either chime in with something or to throw a question out to our panel here. Does anyone want to take a moment to either turn on their mic and ask a question, or to throw something down in the chat window for everybody to discuss, to riff on something we've talked about? We'll just sit here in silence for a second, give someone a chance if they want to. If not, we'll move on. No worries, no pressure.
I had a question, Jason, if no one else
get it.
Step up, but I've been in the situation where I was interviewed, and the TV interviewer was in a bit of a rush to get that sound bite that he was really looking for, and he actually wanted us to stage things in the lab, and I felt quite uncomfortable with it. And then when it went to air on the TV, you could tell that it was very, like, he ran the interview, and I was really disappointed that he took my message out of context or really edited it beyond my control. So I guess I'm asking panelists if they've ever had that experience. Like, I was a junior faculty at the time and I've learned a lot since, but I'm wondering if anybody can speak to maybe personal experiences or media training that might be able to address that.
I'm just going to let whoever wants to jump in there, jump in on there.
I'll jump in. Okay, the soundbite. So the 3-minute thesis is an example of compressing your information into a small window. So you don't have a whole lot of space in order to communicate through this television clip, I guess, Catherine, is what you're referring to. I think that you have to have your key message prepared, I guess. So what is it that you're trying to communicate? And I put a note in the chat there, and I also used it in my own presentation for another session, that inverted pyramid. So when you're preparing your presentation, the public consumes it in the same way that journalists are taught to present it, top heavy. So your who, what, where, when, why should be at the introduction of your presentation. And Kimberly, you alluded to this too, that you have some basic information at the onset that describes the entire content of your presentation. And that came from the whole premise that if the editor had to cut from your news piece, they would cut from the bottom. So condense your content into a small sound bite in your own mind. So as Kimberly said, again, practice it. Try to flip the question so that you're communicating the information that you wish to get out there. And we see it all the time with people who are media savvy, good, bad, and indifferent, I guess. So yeah, just have it in your mind what your key message is, what your communications objective is in delivering that message.
I did a media training thing with a session with Ian McNeil one time, and I know that he was a part of this conference, and Ian had said you can always, if you're getting, let's say, a phone call from an interviewer, and they want to talk to you, you can always, for instance, say, can I call you back? I just need a little bit of time to regroup type of thing, or can we schedule this for another day? And I think that's really important. Get your key messages, exactly what Debbie had said. Write down the points that are important for you to hit home, and be prepared to not give your whole spiel or presentation. It's not that you're trying to limit information entirely, but in some ways you are. If you want them to focus on one thing in particular, I guess that's the thing to just really come back to. And if you can come back to it a couple of times, it might be impossible for the interviewer to not cover that.
Yeah, absolutely. In my little social media thing I put up, there was a link to a series of responses I got from a bunch of SciComm influencers. And one of them I didn't put up, but I thought was a really good response, was to just recognize and expect that whatever you say is going to be taken out of context, because you're going to lose the context, right? Even if it's a thread, someone might retweet one part of your thread, and that's all anyone ever sees. And so just to anticipate that what you say is going to lack context potentially when it's consumed, and therefore to design your comments in such ways so that they can be they carry their context with them in so much as you can, obviously. Do we have any other questions that come in? I wasn't monitoring the chat here for a second. Doesn't look like there's any final questions before. I mean, we'll have a chance to ask them later on, but anyone really jump into the bit to ask something here? All right, so we're now going to jump on to the speed round, okay? So what I want you guys to do, and you can feel free to say pass, okay? I'm gonna throw out, you can keep your mics on. We're gonna do it in this order because it's the order on my screen right now. We're gonna go Adam, Kimberly, AJ, Debbie, okay? Adam, Kimberly, AJ, Debbie. You only have to remember the person who came before you, okay? So I'm gonna throw out a medium, and I want you in one word or one sentence, right, or pass, right? I would like you to say what you would do to add panache to a presentation in that format, okay? In that format. So let's jump through. So again, Adam, Kimberly, AJ, Debbie, okay? So let's start off with TV or radio interviews.
I'm going to pass on this one. Sorry.
Kimberly, TV or radio interviews.
Description of physical presence and or translation in another language.
AJ.
Bullet points, key messages.
Debbie.
Create imagery. So try to give that theater of the mind and say, imagine that.
Okay. Print interviews. Adam.
I don't do well on this. Sorry, guys.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. Come put me at the end of these.
Kimberly.
Pass.
AJ.
Get them to meet in a desirable location for the topic.
Oh, interesting. Okay, Debbie.
Have your key messages memorized word for word.
All right. I'm gonna tell you the ones coming up in advance so you have a chance to prep in your head, Adam. We're gonna go talking with kids, YouTube, then Twitter. All right. Talking with kids.
Use the words that they know.
Kimberly.
Repetition, colors, and props.
AJ.
Find one relatable or one key takeaway.
Debbie.
Don't communicate that the benefits of something is that it's going to kill dandelions.
Fair enough. I just saw a beautiful field of dandelions the other day, by the way. I hate them because they blow into my raised beds, and I'm fighting them in my raised bed, so I don't want them anywhere near me. But I saw the most beautiful field, and I thought about that comment as I drove by. And by the way,
was it my backyard?
No, it was the tarpons, like going by whatever it's called now. What's the park called now?
Open hearth.
Yeah, open hearth.
Yeah.
But that's actually a good example where you had an exemplar there, and it stuck with me. I was driving by, and your voice just came in my head and went, "No, dandelions." All right, YouTube. Adam, YouTube.
Be dynamic.
Kimberly.
Add value and focus on search engine optimization.
We'll revisit that in a second. That's a good, I want to explore that. AJ.
Learn how to edit. It's not that hard.
Debbie?
I'll pass on that. It's not one of my platforms, so I'll take everybody else's advice.
Fair enough. Let's I'll do Twitter or Instagram. Your choice, Adam.
Both strong visuals.
Okay.
That's where people are going to be expecting them.
Kimberly?
I actually want to do both. For Twitter, I'd say focus on threads and your call to action at the end of the thread. And then on Instagram, carousels are amazing because you just keep swiping. And then if you post video, use closed captioning. And on the pictures, make sure you describe using alt text.
Okay. AJ?
For Twitter, engage with everybody who engages with you. So if somebody tweets, retweet them, do the whole thing to infinity. And for Instagram, learn how to use your camera, whether or not that's your phone or if you got a DSLR, but just learn like the rule of thirds and stuff like that. It's very simple.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Debbie?
Again, just strategic messaging so that, you have character limitations. So, excuse me, use it wisely.
Okay. Kimberly, tell me back to you. What's a carousel? I have no idea what that is.
Does anyone follow the Brain Coach? She actually lives in Canada, I think Toronto, I'm not sure. But it's basically you have up to 10 slides and they make it on Canva and it's very colorful. She uses it to teach about mental health. But the best part about carousels is that they're shareable. They end up on other people's stories and you get a lot of engagement that way.
Okay. There was another thing I said that I wanted to revisit. What was it? I forget.
It was search engine optimization.
Search engine optimization. Yeah. So how do you game the system? There's a good one. Any advice on that one?
Using tags and keywords. YouTube is owned by Google, and so most people are searching on YouTube, whereas on Instagram you don't really search for things except using the hashtag. So if you can master, like for example, this would be like how to present with panache. If you title the video how to present with panache and somebody is like how to present with panache, they probably wouldn't use the word panache. So it's probably like how to give a great oral presentation. So just playing around with the words. And there's some, like TubeBuddy, there are some systems that will help you score a keyword and see which one scores the highest. You should use that one.
Okay. Okay, I want to jump to the opposite of kind of where we're going. Can you err on the side of too much panache? Right? Is that a thing? Can you be too panachy? Adam, you're shaking your head here positively. It looks like, or nodding along. Yeah.
Oh, for sure, especially when you're in a scientific background. Approaching your audience with techniques that are maybe that may discredit your position or may make you seem a little less professional is something that I would certainly steer clear of. Finding that fine balance of humor and professionalism can be a tricky one, but if you can find it and stay there, great. But certainly explore which way or how far to go.
Anyone want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, so you're right. There is, you want to maintain credibility, but also I think it's rather common for people to communicate science research in a pretty boring format, and so the level in which you need to show panache is probably higher than maybe what you think or expect. So it's almost like theater. I know Jason comes from a theater background. You almost have to like overact to get that just baseline emotion, that regular human emotion around. You've got to be a little bit more emotional. So sort of, I think about it that way. Wherever you think you're kind of striving to hit as far as your panache level goes, maybe aim for a little bit more than that, and you're probably going to hit somewhere around the right mark.
I agree with AJ. It's the same on video. You have to act up a little just to come off normal.
Fair enough. All right. So Let's talk about real world examples at this point. And people, again, feel free to throw answers into the, Catherine, people actually do that. Improv coaches frequently do come in and work with scientists on things. It can be really useful. It's really uncomfortable the first time if you ever, improv in general is terrifying, but it actually really can be useful to go through, even just to get over just the fear. You make yourself a little absurd for a while, and having done a bit of improv or something, there's no situation that's going to be more absurd than that in a scientific context. So you've already done the worst of it. But I want to now talk about examples of things where you have seen real world examples, and feel free to throw something in the chat if someone else wants to throw in an example. Please do that. So an example, a real world example where you have seen a small change which has added significantly to the quality of a presentation, any media, but something where there's been a little tweak, which has significantly added to the style of the presentation, the engagement, whatever of that presentation. Just think about that for a second. And has anyone got an answer right off the top of your head you'd like to jump in on?
I do.
Yeah.
Small but mighty. So change your slides. So reduce the number, reduce the content on your slides, maintain white space so that it's consumable, not only visually. People do have a habit of reading your slides and kind of ignoring you when you're speaking, so they're looking at your slides instead of you. So don't make it too content heavy.
Kimberly?
Mine was about colors. When I presented a poster, my judge was actually colorblind, and I wouldn't have known that. And some schools want you to use your colors, and I was representing the University of Alabama at the time, so it was green and white and red. And some people do have green-red color blindness. And so I got some points off because they couldn't see the data. And so from now on, I just try to stick to the black and gray scales with just a little bit of color. Because you never know when you'll run into a judge with color blindness.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Kimberly, we're going to swivel back to that in a second. Just as a heads up for everybody, that's the next question I want to look at is ways that you can add Panache to accessibility. We're all should be thinking about how we design everything, universal design for learning, right? How do we design things so it's universally accessible? But often the default is just to put a lot of effort into, the audience, the majority audience, and then this afterthought dry text, for that minority audience. And instead, how do you put the panache in that? We'll come back to that in a second because I think that's a really important thing. But just continuing on this topic, Adam, have you got an example, or AJ?
We had a faculty member who was teaching the 3C program at CBU, if people are familiar with it, where there is students in the classroom, there were students online. At the time it was Skype for Business, which eventually became Microsoft Teams. And then also there's people live stream watching it that weren't kind of participating, but they were getting the material. And the faculty member, when they started, they treated it like a television show. They had a script that they were reading from because they want to make sure that every word was exactly right, and they were more or less speaking to the camera. And what ended up happening was because there was a live audience, because we did know that it was a classroom and the person wasn't engaging with those students, it came off really cold, and it didn't land. And it didn't land for the people who were in the room, and it didn't land for the people who were online and participating, and it didn't land for the people that were just watching it. And so we kind of sat down with the faculty member and we regrouped and we talked about it and said, for the subject matter that you're covering, get your students involved, have a discussion. And I mean, this person was a fascinating prof. And when the students started asking them questions, or when the faculty member would, cover a topic and then throw the questions back to the students, and then, start this kind of like feedback loop as we see in our own classes, that created a warm atmosphere, an engaging atmosphere, a sense of community. So I would say, yeah, if you are doing things online, like try and find ways to bring that sense of community, warmth, students or audience's innate curiosity. I think all of that stuff can really add to your subject matter rather than just sort of reading coldly off of a script.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Anyone else want to get on this?
Well, I'll add something, but it's not in traditional presentation form. It is more so from a social media perspective. Instead of just posting your research or posting something about your research, asking a question or a leading question to your audience, to your followers, is a great way to encourage that engagement and encourage a conversation, and your research will more likely be read that way when the author is actually interested in what their audience is thinking of it, or what their impression is of their message.
Yeah, I see a lot of these, and I follow geology Twitter. I'm a geologist, right? But a lot of these fun things where people will pose puzzles, right? Where it's an image of an outcrop or something, and it'll be like, interpret what's going on here, right? And then there's a thread that follows afterwards. And often they're people who are giving examples they've given their first year class, but sometimes they're advanced examples. Or there's a really fun thread I follow, which is it's cougar or not. It's I forget it. They're pretty much it. It's someone who's a cougar biologist, and like the cliche is that there's always, it's always golden retrievers and stuff, right? And there's still a big debate about whether there are cougars in Cape Breton, for example, right? And hunters will swear they see them, but it's a big debate. Anyway, so the whole thread is just that, but it's actually a really informative thing. It's a game, but you also get to learn. I mean, what are the diagnostic characteristics? There's another one which is it's like Name That Bear or something like that, and it's some of them are polar bears, some of them are grizzly bears, but they're always like weird shots in surveillance videos and things, so it's way over, and you have to try to play that, and it's fantastic because it gamifies the learning, right? But it does it in a static Twitter format, which you wouldn't think necessarily you could do, but it's one image and a couple hundred characters of text, and suddenly it becomes an interactive experience. Anyone else want to jump in on this? Another example? Anyone in the chat as well? If someone's got something down here.
I just want to make mention on something you had said there. I think, never discount the power of social media and dropping little great nuggets of wisdom. You do so much research, you don't need to present it all at once. You can just sort of put stuff in there, and people go to their phones unsolicited and scroll for 10 minutes, 15 minutes at a time, looking for content, for things to pique their interest. So yeah, finding little Twitter games like that and stuff, that can get your message out there for sure.
Fantastic. All right, Kimberly, I want to jump back to you on this one, and then we'll open up to everybody if anyone else has a suggestion. But how do you make sure that our communication for accessibility also has panache? So that's not an afterthought. That what are the ways that we can inject that same kind of enthusiasm into more accessible means of communication?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm gonna focus on alternative texts. I would say using alt text as poetry. There's a workbook by Shannon Finnegan and Bojana Kokliak. I used to work for them, but it's definitely just talking out loud, describing the image out loud, and then trying to write that down, as opposed to saying this is a yellow cat. You would say it in a more poetic way. This way, when someone who has visual impairments is using a screen reader on their phone, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and or any website that is accessible, the image comes off like more alive, more vibrant, and they feel like they're part of the content that they are consuming, not just like an afterthought that you said. And also, Adam, your question, I wanted to know who that was for.
I didn't catch that. Sorry, Kimberly?
There's a question in the chat.
That was me. Sorry about that, Kimberly. Those are great points about accessibility and making things colorful in the descriptions. I think that's an excellent point. I had a question for Adam, which is sort of related to all of this, but it's one thing to post content on social media, but sometimes it might fall flat, or you lose viewers. So I guess I'm wondering. And also some things you do might be a waste of time. So for example, I saw some stats yesterday about blog posts, or it could have been a podcast, but they said for blog posts, you receive, I think 80% of all potential readership within the first day it's posted. So if you only get 15 views for that blog, it's really not going to increase much more than that. So I guess what I'd be looking for is strategies based on the social media that you're an expert or you've got experience in, to like the best ways to engage, to invest your time, and to perhaps retain your followers or subscribers. So that was geared towards Adam because he and I had chatted a little bit about it, but if anybody else has points about that, that would be useful too.
Well, I can certainly comment on Twitter and Instagram in these cases. Twitter, I would certainly not shy away from posting the content multiple times over a period of time. There's no reason that you can post it once and leave it be. Find the right time to post. If you are trying to engage with professionals, you may have to find them maybe at 8 o'clock at nighttime. If you are trying to engage, a younger audience, you might need to find a time where they are peaking on their online presence. And if it does fall flat at first, don't worry. Delete the post. Post it again another time, whether it's multiple times per week or even a month. Let that content live on in multiple posts. When it comes to Instagram, don't shy away from using your Instagram stories to draw attention to your feed post. Your Instagram stories will also allow you to have a link option if you have a certain amount of followers, but making sure that you are engaging with your audience. If there's a question asked, don't just answer with a one-word question. Follow back, or, answer the question and lead up with another question. Encourage that conversation. With more and more engagement, your reach will be increased on that platform. So making sure that you are asking these questions and answering these within a specific amount of time as well. If you with Instagram, if you are having a lot of engagement early on, that post will go a lot further. So be ready to not just post. Don't post and run. Have your post ready. Sit there and see if there's any comments, see if there's any questions, and respond to them as quickly as you can. And if you can encourage more engagement through a question, do that as well.
Great, thanks, Adam. All right, so we're officially out of time, but I want to give everyone just kind of 30 seconds to run through, and if you wanted to just give a take-home message on kind of audience engagement that you really think everyone should take with them if they can. If you want to sum up your thoughts on this or a key point that you really wanted to drive home. AJ, I see you shaking, you're nodding your head here, so I'm going to start with you. Do you have something you wanted to sum us up?
Yeah, I think it actually hits on a bunch of these things and what Adam had just said, but just presentations, communication in general. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So we talked about a bunch of stuff here today, and you're just gonna, you get a big list now, and your next presentation or your next tweet or your next Instagram post, you're gonna bring all of it to the table. You're probably not gonna do that. So just take it in bite sizes, work on honing this over time, right? You have your whole career ahead of you to become an effective science communicator. So just incorporate little things at a time and be persistent. I made a post there in the chat window that if you write a blog post, right, you only get your 15 views in the first day. That's not a failure. Don't stop writing blog posts. Like, keep writing blog posts. And over time, you're going to get feedback from those people who did read the blog post. If they made comments on it, like, make a comment back to them, reach out to them, find out what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. So just keep iterating all the time. And that's the way I think any of us become better communicators. And the other piece there is that, there are people that are professionals, right? They're professionals in communication. And if this is your career, maybe consulting with a professional communicator could really help you out, right? And so if it's photography and you're out in the field doing a lot of great field work, and you think that it's pretty interesting, exciting, and there's nobody in your field that's doing great Instagram shots, like, hire Adam. Say, Adam, can we go out for an afternoon? You show me how to use a DSLR camera, and that's one afternoon of your life, and now you're like the best photographer doing geology work in Cape Breton. I don't know. So I think seeing this as a skill that you can learn is really important, and like following through and being persistent.
Fantastic. So I really am going to push people on 30 seconds, and we'll keep around if if people want to stick around afterwards. But just to sum that up, AJ, basically a presentation involves technical skills that that there are technical experts you can learn from and learn over time, right? Get progressively better, something like that. Debbie, have you got something for us?
I'll try to keep it to 30 seconds. I guess the most important thing about the presentation style or delivering something with panache is relative to your audience. So consider your audience first and foremost in trying to develop that engaging presentation.
Fantastic. Kimberly?
I'd say stay consistent and don't be afraid to try something new and make sure you're adding value.
Great. And Adam, you want to close us off here?
Sure thing. Go back to the point where, know your audience, know what they understand, know what they want to learn, increase your reach by using common hashtags that you think your audience will be following or your prospective audience will be following, and of course use a strong visual.
Fantastic. Well, thanks to our panel. Thanks to all the participants. Next week, we have a chance to get back together and share some of these things. So in the intervening week, I'd recommend, if you're not already, follow our panelists, go and follow a bunch of people on social media, and do some homework by enjoying some fantastic content. I mean, that's the best part about this, is that learning from really good communicators means you're being communicated well to, and that should be fun on its own. If people want to stick around for a few minutes, we'll formally call it done and you guys can take off. But if you want to stick around for a couple of minutes, you're welcome to, and we can continue the chat for a couple of minutes. But otherwise, you guys have a great afternoon and enjoy the sun.